He kōna ipurangi tēnei nā te reo irirangi o Aotearoa.
Just a quick warning, this podcast contains descriptions of violence that some listeners might find confronting. It was a bloody miserable night, 14th of November 1987. Inside Kaitoki Prison near Wanganui, convicted murderer Ross Appelgren has just quietly cut through the bars on his cell window. As Ross heaved himself up and out through the hole he created, there to meet him was rain, thunder, wind, the works. He now just had to make it to the perimeter fence, hack his way through, and he'd be home free. But that was easier said than done.
Crawling along the roof towards the end of the wing, I saw a movement out the corner of my eye. I froze. The night patrolman was climbing up a tower overlooking the yards directly to my left. I hugged the roof, trying to make myself blend in, but felt 3 metres tall. He must see me. He stood looking towards me, silhouetted against the night, and I was so sure he would notice me that I felt physically sick.
You're listening to Nark, an RNZ investigative podcast. I'm your host, Mike Wesley-Smith. This is episode 10, Escape.
I realised that I was banging my head against a brick wall. I had exhausted all my legal avenues.
By March 1987, Ross's battle to clear his name was dead in the water. His appeal had been turned down, his lawyer had given up criminal law in disgust, and his foreseeable future was behind bars. To make matters worse, Ross's latest request to police for all of Ernie and Gordon's statements was rejected. What was left?
Right or wrongly, I decided to escape, hoping to gain some publicity.
Now, as we've learned, when the chips were down, Ross resorted to escaping. Apart from the trip to the optometrist, there were 3 other attempts. Though up to that point, he'd been pretty hopeless at it, never getting far before getting recaptured. Though in early 1987, a scheme had formed in his head. If he could somehow engineer a move away from the fortress that was Pāremoremo to a lower security prison, he might just have a chance. So he took a punt and asked to be sent to Kaitoki Prison in Wanganui, where he had done a lag in 1981.
It had to be Kaitoki. No one escapes from Parry Maximum. Dean Whitcliffe tried it in the early 1970s, and he only got about 100 metres. From Kaitoki, anything seemed possible.
Ross put in his request, and believe it or not, it was accepted. The Secretary of Justice approved Ross's transfer on good behaviour grounds. One supportive prison official wrote,
"His work and conduct are excellent. He was recently employed in the officers' mess as a cook, a job he has completed in an exemplary manner."
Not everyone was so keen on the idea. Another official spelled out what I thought would have been bleedingly obvious.
Appelgren was convicted of killing another inmate at Mount Eden Prison. I feel we should be very cautious about placing Appelgren in medium security at such an early stage in his sentence, despite his good conduct. He has an extensive prison history and a recent escape attempt.
Even now, I find it astonishing that that was somehow the minority view. But Ross's powers of persuasion won the day. Transferred to Kaitoki Prison on 18th of May 1987.
I thought it was quite a good sort of prison. We were a medium security prison with facilities for high security.
This former Kaitoki prison guard has asked not to be identified. He worked there when Ross arrived.
He's been assessed as obviously being capable of working in a place like Kaitoki, or being able to complete his sentence in Kaitoki.
Kaitoki Prison, I hated the place. The wind off the west coast froze your bones. The petty rules and regulations could well freeze your spirit.
What can you recall of Ross Appelgren?
Well, he seemed to be quite a reasonable fellow. You know, he didn't seem to involve himself in anything aggressive or violent. He always seemed to be cheerful when I saw him. He usually had a smile when he was talking to someone and sharing a joke, perhaps.
According to a later report on his time at Kaitoki Prison, Ross was highly regarded by staff, which, as you've heard, was something of a common theme.
I settled in, and after a few teething problems, all got back to normal. I had a few mates in Kaitoke, so at least I could settle in easily.
While at Kaitoke, Ross was able to get a job, and of all places, the prison kitchen.
Did you have any thoughts when you heard that he was allowed to work in the Kaitoke prison kitchen, having been convicted of killing someone in an uneaten kitchen?
Well, I did think it was odd, but we were a medium security jail, no different from Mount Eden, and he was, they must have given him some kind of assessment when he came through, and then if he's already been working in the kitchen, then you probably I don't have to train this guy as much. He wouldn't have got to Kaitoke if he was considered overly violent.
From the moment he arrived in Kaitoke, Ross started formulating a way to escape. Part of his plan involved moving from a job in the kitchen to one in the laundry.
I knew what had to be done, but the details needed the sort of planning for which I needed time alone. Over the next few months, I worked, slowly learning the run of the place. I managed to acquire a pair of trousers and a shirt, the first items for my escape kit, and also, as a bonus, some camouflage paint, which I came across one day while cleaning some army jackets. My cell was situated on the top floor of the wing, and from it I could look out over the fields. Every day I looked out and knew that I would run free across them. I had a mate working in the engineer's shop. Dropped a word to him, and within days received a hacksaw blade. This, of course, was the most important item I would need. Meantime, I ran, worked out, went on a diet and generally kept fit. The road ahead would not be easy, and I knew that a lot would depend on my fitness. Time was ticking by. It was November. I'd been here nearly 5 months, and I was getting uptight. My mind was in overdrive. In prison, it's one thing to make a decision, another to stop going over and over the rights and wrongs of it.
Cutting through the bars on his cell window took him one step closer to his goal.
The cutting was not an easy job. The timing had to be exact, because in Kaitoke they do a master check every half hour. I had lookouts posted, radios turned up to drown the noise, and diversions arranged. But paranoia was always with me. Does the screw know? Is he looking at me? At times I thought the whole jail knew, but of course this wasn't so. The robots kept on their daily course and my fears were unfounded. There was now an additional reason for haste. The bars looked okay, but if it had occurred to a screw to tap them, then that would have been a different story. I was nearly ready now. My list of gear was a hacksaw blade, wire cutters, civilian clothing and camouflage paint, 6 bars of energy chocolate and 10 Moro bars, a Walkman radio with fresh batteries, Brill cream mixed with camouflage paint, which would change the colour of my fair hair, golden syrup and paper, cream-coloured putty and paint, courtesy of the painters gang. With this rather unusual travel kit, I was ready.
At this point, Ross only needed one more thing, and it wasn't something he could wrangle from a fellow inmate.
Rain, you bastard, rain. Why is it that it only rains when you don't want it to? I wanted the dirtiest weather there was as a good smother. Over a couple of days, with help, I managed to cut my bars, putting them up and repainting them. They would pass unless there was a close inspection.
Finally, on November 14th, 1987, a storm came.
There was one last job to do, and this could only be done on the last day. I had to smash the glass out of my window frame without much sound, and without letting any of the glass fall into the concrete below my cell, where it might have raised some interesting questions.
Smashing a window at night without causing much sound was no easy task. Ross managed to pull it off by using a rock wrapped in a curtain. He then caught the broken glass on a newspaper smeared with golden syrup.
There was the odd heart-stopping tinkle of glass on concrete. No one noticed. I was safe. A quick clean-up, a shower, and it was time to say goodbye to my mates. We had a drink and a smoke together. It was quite a buzz. Adrenaline's pumping full tilt, but suddenly I felt rather lonely. I made a last check of my supplies, to which I added a few sandwiches and a plastic bottle of drinking water.
Prison staff later reported they last saw Ross at around 9 p.m. that evening.
Lock-up time. This was it. A few handshakes, words of encouragement, and I walked into my cell. The screws came around, locking the doors. The last check, they were gone. I sat down, had a cigarette.
Heavy rain drummed on the prison roof. Doors and windows caught by the wind banged and rattled. It was enough to drown out the sound of an escape.
9:45 p.m. Getting up to the window, I grabbed the first bar, putting all my weight on it and pulled. It bent like butter. The second was more difficult, but by kicking it at an angle, I managed to free it.
Leaning around the bent bars and broken glass, Ross got his first sniff of freedom.
And for the first time in 2.5 years, I did it. I could truly breathe the night air. It's impossible to describe that feeling, but it's one of the best going. Being 2 stories up, I had to be careful not to fall to the concrete below. Balancing on the ledge, I reached up and grabbed the roof guttering, slung my bag of goodies up, pulled myself over, and laid there resting for a moment, watching the night sky.
Now, the tricky part. Ross had to get from the roof down to the perimeter fence, all without being spotted.
Crawling along the roof towards the end of the wing, I saw a movement out the corner of my eye. I froze. The night patrolman was climbing up a tower overlooking the yards directly to my left. I hugged the roof, trying to make myself blend in, but felt 3 metres tall. He must see me. He stood looking towards me, silhouetted against the night, and I was so sure he would notice me that I felt physically sick. But being a good robot, to him, it was only routine, and he was only doing what he had done for years. Satisfied with his job, he climbed down, and I could breathe easier. Then my heart was beating so fast that I lay still for a few minutes. Just a quiet minute. Looking down as I crawled onto the end of the roof was freaky. It was lit up like daylight, but I couldn't stay where I was, so I grabbed my bag and dropped it to the ground. Shit, I couldn't believe it. The screw was still doing its round and was just coming around the edge of the building. There was my bag in full view. He couldn't miss it. But again, routine saved me. He passed by without turning his head, and I was safe. I knew that if I jumped, I risked a broken ankle or worse, so I grabbed the guttering and swung over until my feet touched a window ledge. Reaching down with one arm, I grasped at the bars and let go of the guttering to gain a better grip below.
Then suddenly, Ross heard a shout and felt someone latch onto his arm.
Gotcha! I heard someone laugh. I nearly yelled out. I had landed outside a mate's window. He had grabbed my wrist through the bars and down near giving me a heart attack. "See you, mate," he said as he let me go. "I bloody hope not," I replied, and meant every word. I dropped, grabbed my bag, ran to the fence line, cut a hole, and took off across the fields. I think I broke the mile record. I ran faster than I thought possible until the prison was out of sight. The rain came. I was truly happy for the first time in years. I can't describe my feelings. Running free after being caged up for so long is an experience a person or an animal can only feel for themselves.
Ross's escape was first detected at 2:30 in the morning, when a guard found the small hole he'd cut in the perimeter fence. Prison staff scrambled to check who was missing. When the door to Ross's cell swung open into an empty room, the alarm was raised. Ross had left behind a knife pouch, screwdriver, and perhaps symbolically, a letter from the Ombudsman about his claims he was wrongfully convicted. By 3 a.m, police were at the prison and did an aerial and ground search of the surrounding area. A police dog picked up Ross's scent leading away from the prison, but soon lost it due to the heavy rainfall.
What can you recall was the general reaction when it was realised he had escaped?
Oh, yeah, sort of the holy heck type of thing. How did this happen?
That very same question soon stormed into the disbelieving minds of prison bosses in Wellington.
I stopped for a smoke and worked out my directions. I didn't know the area well, but knew the general direction of Wanganui, and so, feeling great despite the weather, I ran. The wind and rain washing over me. Man, it was grouse. I knew where I wanted to be by daybreak, the start of the Paraparas. This was the route I aimed to take, as I knew better than to go near civilization.
Just a note, the Paraparas is a local term for State Highway 4, which links Wanganui to the town of Raetihi.
The further away, the better. I was glad for the training I'd been doing. It was going to be needed in the days ahead. On reaching the outskirts of Wanganui, I followed the river. The odd car was moving on the road, and whenever this happened, I hid. Daybreak was not far off, and I stopped for a rest and to listen to the radio. There it was.
It's 7:45. Let's take a look at the daily newspapers now.
Good morning. Police are hunting an escaped killer from Kaitoki prison in Wanganui yesterday.
My escape had been noticed, and they were giving my description. Over 6 feet tall, I laughed. I'm only 5'9". Fair hair, correct, but only temporarily. Considered dangerous, bullshit. No mention of my glasses, which I wear all the time. No mention of my tattoos that smother my arms. Feeling much better, I carried on, looking for a nice secluded spot so I could rest for the day. I found it at the start of the Parapara Gorge and settled down to eat a bar of chocolate, have a drink of water, listen to the news again, and sleep. I'd covered over 20 kilometres and I was exhausted. I woke about midday to find that it was still raining, but this suited me fine. Over the next 5 days I slept, ran, walked and hid whenever it was necessary. Finding myself not far from Raetihi, I stopped for the night. I came across a cow trough and stripped off, washed myself down and threw away my prison clothes, donning the civilian gear from my pack. A mixture of Brill cream and camouflage paint changed my hair to a dirty brown. I settled down for the night. It was starry and clear, and the solitude was overwhelming. I felt very much at ease, but lay awake for hours, thinking. The moment of truth was coming closer, and I still didn't know how I was going to get the attention to my case that I needed. Still, I was free.
As Ross adjusted to life outside the wire, the questions surrounding his escape were being hotly debated in Parliament.
Mr. Speaker!
National MP Paul East demanded answers from Associate Justice Minister Philip Wollaston.
Is it normal policy to move a person who has been convicted of a brutal killing and who is considered, according to media reports, to be a danger to the public from maximum security only 2.5 years after a conviction?
It is the normal policy for the Classification Committee to consider all aspects of a prisoner's history and behaviour before recommending a change to the security classification.
Did the Classification Committee make a mistake in this case for which the Minister will take responsibility?
But the Minister wasn't having any of it.
The Classification Committee applies the guidelines laid down for the classification of prisoners.
Hundreds of kilometres away, the red faces of politicians were the furthest thing from Ross's mind. Through the help of friends and periods of hitchhiking, Ross managed to get himself to the Waikato, then hid out for a spell in the Coromandel, before ending up in the small town of Ngātia, on his way to his intended destination, Auckland.
Later, I walked out of town. There were only a few houses left to pass, and as I drew level with one of them, I noticed a guy digging his garden. His dog came running up to the fence, barking. Looking up from his work, the guy waved a greeting. I returned it, then noticed the nearby sign, Police Station. What a bit of humour.
When the news had first broken of Ross's escape, police stations around the country were notified to be on alert.
Here we were, greeting each other in this friendly fashion. If only he'd known. I felt then that my disguise must be good, knowing that he and all the other police stations would have had wanted posters out on me. My confidence rising, I smiled and stuck my thumb out. Neat. The car stopped almost at once. The two guys were heading for Auckland. I hopped in with a thanks, and away we went. These guys were louts, but I wasn't fussy, and I joined them in a few beers. In quick time we arrived in Auckland and they dropped me off. I made my way to my friend's place. Now back in Auckland, I could at least begin my real fight for justice.
By the 25th of November 1987, Ross had been on the run for 10 days. The prosecutor at his trial, Stuart Grieve, was interviewed by a reporter about the escape. Grieve said he was concerned for his own safety and believed Ross could be hunting Ernie, the main Crown witness. It prompted Ross to ring his friend and supporter Rosemary Wilson. They recreated that phone call in Ross's memoir.
Look at all those newspaper stories. I'm supposed to be armed, dangerous, seeking revenge. Why are they saying all that stuff? Do you reckon they're looking for an excuse to shoot me? Why?
I don't know.
I've been offered the chance to leave New Zealand.
How?
Boat?
Are you going?
No.
You know they'll get you in time.
Of course I do, but not today. I need your help.
Look, Ross,
Hey, just listen, okay? I heard something on the radio the other day about my seeking revenge. I want the chance to say it isn't true. I want to put my side of the story to tell what's happened to me and why. So I phoned the news people at Radio Pacific, spoke to a bloke called Mike Hagler for quite a while.
What did he say?
Told me to give myself up, but when I said no way, he said he'd make a deal, put me on a program with the morning talkback host. What's his name? Coleman? And if they could get the promise of a retrial from the Minister of Justice, would I give myself up then?
And would you?
Of course. That's all I did this for.
Ross, they couldn't get that assurance in a million years. The minister would refuse point blank to make any deal at all with an escaped prisoner.
Maybe. Have you got a better idea?
No.
That's all I need to know. Will you listen in?
Will I ever? Might even tape it for you.
Can I call you in a day or two?
Sure you can. Hey, Ross. Take care.
Hey, lady, you forgot something. You're supposed to tell me to give myself up, remember? Don't want to be a crim yourself, do you?
Okay, Ross. Give yourself up.
Okay, but my way. Okay, Chief?
Remarkably, Radio Pacific agreed to have Ross phone in live on air to discuss his case while on the run.
Good morning, Graham Coleman with you to one. Thank you for joining us.
This is the actual broadcast that went out on the national airwaves on the 11th of December 1987. Ross had now been free for almost a month. According to a former Radio Pacific employee, the station told Ross they couldn't guarantee that police wouldn't try to trace the call. Ross's solution was that he would dial in from different phone boxes and move on every 10 minutes.
On January 6, 1985, Mount Eden prison inmate Darcy Tahira sat down to breakfast alone in a room of the jail's kitchen bar. Moments later, he had his skull crushed like an eggshell. 18 hours after that, he was dead. This morning, our special guest is the man convicted of murdering him.
It was probably the strangest moment of my life, standing in a telephone box, listening to the news broadcast coming down the line, waiting for Graham Coleman, the morning host on Radio Pacific, to speak to me. I was pretty nervous. The phone box was in a quiet street. We would get plenty of warning if a police car approached.
Almost 40 years later, Graham Coleman still remembers the part he played in this piece of Kiwi radio history.
Well, I was hosting the morning talkback program, so it was 9 to 1 p.m, 5 days a week, Monday to Friday.
And Graham, can you recall what your first reaction was when someone said to you that about, hey, we've got this murderer on the run, what about hosting on your show for 4 hours?
Well, I don't think I would have even contested that. I take that as a great challenge to understand the case and then to follow professional practice, because he was, without hope but convinced of his innocence and clever enough to engineer a successful escape.
Now, something to know about Graham Coleman. He'd been an old-school investigative journalist, uncovering inconvenient government truths like abuses in psychiatric hospitals. It meant he was equipped with a receptive mind that day to hear Ross make his case.
Ross Appelgren was not only a convicted murderer, he's also on the run after breaking out of Kaitoki prison near Wanganui on November 15 this year. Ross Appelgren says he didn't kill Darcy Tahira. He wants a retrial. He wants a chance to state his case. Radio Pacific is giving him that chance this morning.
Was your kind of motivation for doing it to try and, bring some a spotlight on a case that you thought had some serious questions around it?
Well, I wasn't fully backgrounded on the case at that point, but how fascinating to talk to someone on the run who's convicted of murderer and to say, why are you running? What do you want? What happened? And what do you want to happen next? I think it's one of the good things the station does, and it's one of the good things the media does. It's its role to be open-minded and listen for what is happening, particularly when we had begun the process of exposing unsafe verdicts, unsafe evidence and unsafe police practices. And it's a duty to listen and to explore, I think.
Unfortunately, only a small amount of original audio still remains from Ross's hours-long appearance on Radio Pacific. You've heard some of it already. Here's the rest.
For the first time on New Zealand radio, you will have a chance not only to hear, but to talk back with a convicted murderer on the run in this country. Ross Appelgren is on a telephone and he'll talk to us for the next 4 hours. Let's see if he's got through, shall we? Are you there, Ross?
Yes.
Yes, good morning to you.
Good morning.
You want Auckland to hear your case, do you?
Yes, I would, actually.
Why is that?
Well, I believe that miscarriage of justice was done, police withheld evidence, and I'd like a chance to have my say about things.
While Radio Pacific were happy to give Ross a platform, Graham Coleman said he didn't give Ross a free ride.
So you're looking for the who, why, where, when and how, and you're looking for balance as well, and looking to ask what I think he later described as fair but tough questions. And he would have expected that, and he got that, and I think he benefited from that.
Coleman was tough, but he was fair.
The station knew Ross had to dash away every 10 minutes to change phones.
Finding a phone was a problem in itself. We'd made a map and marked public phones, but some were occupied or out of order. It seemed a long time between them, but we were able to listen to the program on the car radio.
To fill the gaps, Coleman invited some experts to give their views as well.
From a radio point of view, it was important to have people who had some expert knowledge in the criminal law and experience in prison, and also just the mere fact that Ross was going to hang up and change phone booths each time, and there'd be a 10 to 15 minute delay while he did this, and we got him back on. It was important to have the experts talking about what was important, because we knew Ross could hear while he was moving.
Guests that joined the program included Rosemary Wilson's friend and former Justice Minister Martin Finlay and law professor Bill Hodge.
Dr. Martin Finlay, the former Minister of Justice, expressed his concern about the way my case had been handled. I've never met Dr. Finlay, but I respect him, as so many other prison inmates do, because of the great job he did as a minister.
Was the view of Martin Finlay and Bill Hodge that there were some legitimate questions, maybe not necessarily around the simple subject of his guilt or innocence, but rather the fairness of his trial?
They, I think, raised questions about the safety of jailhouse testimony, especially if it was to the benefit of the prisoner giving the testimony. And then they were particularly informative about what section of the law he could use in order to gain a trial, and that was one which involved gathering new evidence. So that, I think, gave Ross information for the first time that he could focus on in an effort to secure a retrial or his freedom.
Dr. Hodge said that there was only one way in which my case could return to the Court of Appeal. If new evidence was available, then a petition could be made to the Governor-General under Section 406 of the Crimes Act. A successful petition would open the side door of the Court of Appeal, and the court could then do one of three things: rule that the conviction should stand, quash the conviction and order a new trial, or simply quash the conviction. His guess was that, given the facts as he understood them in a brief summary, the court would probably take the middle course. This was new hype, though Dr. Hodge and Dr. Finlay both warned that the 406 path was long and agonisingly complex. Obviously, if the Minister of Justice could promise a retrial, it would be preferable, but they doubted that he would.
Graham asked Ross for a public assurance he would turn himself in if Radio Pacific could get Justice Minister Geoffrey Palmer to promise him a retrial.
I gave it gladly. He asked me if I would come to the studio to give myself up, and again, I agreed.
But the station had trouble contacting Palmer. So in the meantime, Graham opened up the talkback phone lines to members of the public.
I expected an audience which, for talkback, most of the time, there was more older people than younger would be quite affronted by someone who's convicted of murder coming on a program and would want him to go back to prison. And so towards the end, the last hour of the program, I was throwing it open to the public on what do you think he should do now? Should he give up? Should he go back?
From all over Auckland and from further afield, people phoned in. I braced myself for some flack. Instead, the support I received was overwhelming. I will always be grateful to the ordinary men and women out there who gave me their moral support that morning. It boosted my confidence and made me realise that people do care what is happening within the system. Sometimes when you're inside, you begin to wonder if that's true. Coleman asked every one of them whether they thought I should give myself up, and I was amazed when not one agreed that I should. Messages like, hang in there and don't give in, filled the airwaves.
There was a very strident view that he should stay out and not give himself up and go for justice. So there was the rebels and the rebel instinct in New Zealanders. They knew something was wrong. They knew from listening to him for 3 hours that this isn't quite right, so stand your ground.
When he was eventually contacted, Geoffrey Palmer also stood his ground. He was a no-show on the program.
The Minister of Justice, Mr. Geoffrey Palmer, refused to take part in the program. He took the view that it was impertinent of me to suggest a deal, and he was probably right. You get impertinent when you're desperate. In any event, he could not or would not offer a retrial.
So, with the opportunism typical of any good opposition MP, the National Justice spokesman Paul East filled the void.
So I interviewed him and he went off and rang the Ministry of Justice, and the Minister of Justice said he could see what he could do. And then later on he rang back and said, well, they've offered a departmental inquiry to look into what had happened. But I don't think that was a strong enough response at the time.
I thought at first that this might be a solution, but Bill Hodge took the view that unless there was an open and independent public inquiry, I would be unwise to accept. My own feelings, then and now, were that he was right. Departmental inquiries were no substitute for a return to the Court of Appeal.
The 4-hour talkback session even generated some leads regarding the murder.
The following day we had specific information from a person who was willing to sign an affidavit saying he knew who did it and who was in the prison at the time. So that was passed on by the station to Ross's lawyers.
But it also generated a whole heap of controversy. During the broadcast, Ross referred to Gordon and Ernie by their real names in breach of court suppression orders. As he would testify in Ross's second trial, Gordon found out and got spooked.
My name was used on a number of occasions on Radio Pacific. I had no money, or very little money. I was given, I think it was $200, and I went away and looked after myself. I changed my name, got a new passport, legally, and I then actually left the country for a while, but with no assistance from the police.
In a 1996 interview with Keith Davies, Ross revealed he'd actually seen Gordon while he was on the run. Ross told Keith he was
sitting in this house in Pakuranga, having a cup of coffee with a mate, when this taxi draws up, and who should get out but Gordon. He was visiting his sister-in-law who lived next door.
As Keith reported, Ross made no effort to exact revenge on Gordon. In fact, Ross said he never even approached him. Justice Minister Geoffrey Palmer was furious about Ross's appearance on Radio Pacific. The escapee had now embarrassed his Justice Department for a second time in less than a month. First the escape, then this. The political opposition jumped in, demanding an inquiry, saying it was astonishing the police couldn't arrest Ross while he was on the air. Palmer instead laid a formal complaint against Radio Pacific, claiming the broadcast breached the laws requiring it to have regard for the maintenance of law and order.
Palmer was calling it an affront to law-abiding citizens that we dared to listen to this gentleman. It must have been before he passed the Human Rights Act and freedom of speech legislation, but
Radio Pacific was defiant. Managing Director Derek Lowe told the media, "We feel we were engaged in the pursuit of justice by giving Appelgren the opportunity to talk about his grievances."
It was silly to threaten to complain to the broadcasting authorities, and those complaints could be quite serious because your licence could be revoked. Derek Lowe was standing the station's ground on what I call our duty, to give Ross and the public a chance to hear about what was going on.
In the end, the minister's complaint fizzled out. As for Ross, back in 1987, going on the radio hadn't resulted in a retrial, but it had been worth it.
Perhaps the most useful gift from the program was the information from both Dr. Hodge and Dr. Finlay that there was a way in which my case could be heard in the Court of Appeal if new evidence was available.
That evidence, Ross thought, had to be those elusive statements from Gordon and Ernie.
I wanted desperately to prove my innocence, yet could not bring myself to give myself up, with the probability that I would be returned to prison for a minimum of 7 long years.
After his radio appearance, Ross hid out with some friends at a house in Henderson. But his time as a free man was running out.
I had a few beers and arranged a board for a few days at a house in South Auckland. The arrangements were settled, and being overconfident, I decided to have a few more beers. This was the first time I'd overindulged since my escape, and I fell asleep on the nearest bed. Crash! I awoke wondering what the hell was happening. Smash! In crashed the door, and a gun was pointed at my head. Freeze! Was the first word spoken, and I did. There was no way I was going to give these bastards the excuse to shoot. They asked me if I was armed, and I replied, no, handcuffing me behind my back. They threw a few questions at me and placed me in a car to be taken back to Auckland Central Headquarters.
Ross had been a fugitive for 65 days. He was dragged back into the system he'd run from. But his escape would achieve its aim.
Yes, I do have an opinion, and that opinion is, I think, unbending, and that is that this man is innocent.
I'm not a lawyer, but even I knew this was dynamite.
The implications are staggering.
Turning his murder conviction on its head. Coming up on the next episode of Nark. Thanks for listening to Nark, hosted and written by me, Mike Wesley Smith. I'm also extremely grateful to everyone who spoke with me for this podcast, especially Suzanne Young and Julia Appelgren. And if anyone listening has more information about this case, I'd be keen to hear from you. Send an email to nark@rnz.co.nz. Follow and listen to Nark wherever you get your podcasts. And if you've enjoyed it, use the share button to recommend it to a friend. Some more quick thank yous to Ngā Taonga and Mediaworks for some of the archival audio, and to the voice actors who helped bring some of the characters in this episode to life. Craig Genty, Tony Stamp, Elliot Childs, William Ray, Giles Beckford, Bonnie Harrison and Jack Sargent. The RNZ producers who worked on this episode were Liz Garton, William Ray, Duncan Smith and Justin Gregory. The audio engineer was William Saunders. Thanks also to Steve Burridge and Jeremy Ansell for the studio wrangling, and to Kevin Golding for opening the doors to me every week after hours. Graphics were designed by Amrita Marks, and the shorthand page, where you can find more information on this story, was made by Hing-Yi Kong. Check it out at rnz.co.nz/nark. Tim Watkin is RNZ's Executive Editor Audio, and Brianna Uritich-Gregg is the Production Coordinator. You can find more of RNZ's great podcasts like Media Watch on the RNZ website, rnz.co.nz/podcasts. Check them out. Bye for now.